Welcome to the Passive Income Machine podcast, where we show you how to break free from the grind and achieve real financial freedom in 10 years or less. My name is Ryan D. Lee, and I've helped thousands turn income into cash flow, trade fake money for real assets, and take back control over their time, their wealth, and ultimately their life. Each week, you're going to get the strategy, the tools, and the mindset to build your very own passive income machine. So sit back, relax, and enjoy today's episode. All right, my friends, welcome to today's episode. I am very excited to be sharing the presentation with you today because what I'm going to do with you today is I'm going to share with you a presentation that I gave at our last infield event where we were looking at acquiring assets that work in this economy, assets that build your wealth, and assets that help you achieve 6 figures of tax-free income in 10 years or less. Now, you see, all of this is done through a very carefully curated strategy that we call the passive income machine. And the entire purpose of this presentation is to help you see the unseen. It's to help you see the things that are hidden in plain sight, that are obscured from your view oftentimes, that prevent you from achieving the financial freedom that you desire. So you're on the microphone today with me, Ryan D. Lee. So sit back, relax, and welcome to today's episode. Now, my friends, every single year we do several infield events. I truly believe that one of the best investments you can make is an investment in your community, in your network, in a group of individuals that help you see your blind spots, and understand that financial freedom is never achieved alone, right? The more you try to listen to a podcast and do it on your own, the harder it's going to be to ever achieve meaningful financial results. But when you surround yourself with people who are pursuing excellence, who are moving in the same direction as you, your belief starts to change. Your pace at which you carry yourself starts to accelerate. And ultimately what happens is you achieve your objectives so much faster. So every single year we go out to the field. We do one infield event that's an investing event. We call that Cash Flow Heaven. We do one infield event that's a community strategy building event. We call that Rise Up Live. And then we do several live workshops, sometimes at my house and sometimes at a field location. So this event happens to be Cash Flow Heaven. And this year we aggregated or collected our community in Florida, and we talked about really how to achieve 6 figures of tax-free income in 10 years or less. And the objective of this weekend was to set up a game with a goal that you could build a financial strategy that you could not lose. Now, for those of you that want to follow along with some of the slides that I'm going to share, we do have a YouTube channel, if you're not aware, associated with this podcast. I personally like the podcast. So if you're listening on audio, I'm going to explain everything to you. But if you're on YouTube, welcome to the game, my friends. You're going to be seeing some slides to go along with this podcast. So the objective of this presentation is to help you understand the game in which you are playing and to structure a financial game that you cannot lose. Now, it's critically important that you define the win so you understand what winning means. I cut that out of this presentation for brevity. But really, in today's world, to try to win the game of money, there's a lot of uncertainty that we have to face. I mean, as I was preparing this presentation, here are just a few things to consider. Right now in the world of Donald Trump being in the Oval Office, there's a lot of chaos going on. And listen, right now, one of the big things that a lot of businesses, a lot of, people are contending with is this concept of tariffs, that, tariffs are impacting the cost of goods. They're impacting the labor, they're impacting housing, which is making it more expensive. We're dealing with, the Federal Reserve, Jerome Powell fighting with Donald Trump about interest rates. We're dealing with the downgrade of the United States. This hasn't happened in over 100 years, and most people don't even know it just happened. But our credit rating as a country just got downgraded for the first time in 100 years. That's across all 3 meaningful credit agencies. They now no longer believe that we are as strong and as stable as we might like to think we are. And so the U.S. economy was just downgraded. Our credit ratings were downgraded. We've got Jamie Dimon, the leader of Chase Bank, saying, people don't need to focus on money. They need to focus on guns and ammo based on what's coming out. Now, that's kind of crazy coming from a world banker. And then we have quietly below the surface that is accelerating at an ever faster pace, the AI revolution. And, the founder of LinkedIn believes that within 10 years, 9-to-5 work will be, obsolete. So there's a lot of uncertainty in the world that we're living in. And so the objective is to build a game that you cannot lose, to become inevitable inside of this marketplace, that you're making the moves in such a way that you're going to win or win big. That's ultimately what this podcast and this episode is going to be about. But in order to understand how to do this, I like to believe, or I like to look at the economy kind of as a game, the game of money. And ultimately, the reason I like to do that is in a game, there are rules. And if we understand the rules of the game, it becomes so much easier to understand how to win the game. Now, in this economy, it might feel like there's a lot of uncertainty, and there is, but underneath that uncertainty, what gives you a semblance of a framework or a decision-making process is there are quite literally rules that govern the game of money. And it's important, my friends, that you understand what these rules are, because if we're really being honest with ourselves, the game of money is ultimately a game of life. You're trading the better parts of your days, your months, your years, your decades for money, hoping that one day you have enough money to buy your life back. That's the concept of retirement. I believe when you understand the real game of money and the rules that govern that game, you can achieve financial freedom, mean buy your life back in 10 years or less. So the game of money is a game of life, and the concept really is, how do we win in this game of money? What are the rules, kind of like in Monopoly, to go around, collect our, pass go, collect our $200, buy the right properties, collect the right rent, and achieve financial freedom, ultimately win the game of money. Now, the first thing, like I said, is understanding what winning means for you. And we spent a lot of time really defining the win. I gave the audience that was there at this event my 5 definitions of winning with money. And without a clear understanding of winning means, you're going to play the game. And you're playing the game whether you like it or not. You're playing the game whether you intentionally choose in or not. The game of money is the game of life. And so why not get clear on what it means to win? But the real thing I want this podcast and this episode to be about is how to make the game of money easy. Hey, it's Ryan jumping in real quick with something that you do not want to miss. The How to Retire in 10 Years Summit is coming up, and this is the event that makes everything we do here possible. If you're ready to build real passive income and take control over your money and ultimately your life in 2025, now's the time. Early registration is open, and there's an exclusive bonus waiting when you join the list. Just hit the link in the show notes or head to retireintenyears.com. All right, back to the show. My friends, a couple of years ago, I read a book that really for the first time helped me understand the game that we're playing in. Now, you see, for me, in 2008, I lost everything I had put into my 401ks and IRAs. Not everything, but pretty much. I realized I had no control. I realized, I wanted to retire early, but in playing a game that I didn't understand, that I didn't control, I was just along for the ride. I was essentially gambling. I read Rich Dad, Poor Dad, and I'm so grateful that I read that book because it opened me up to a possibility that everything I thought I knew about money was wrong. Now, it didn't give me a framework to operate by, but it opened me up to the alternative world of looking at money. I then picked up Robert Allen's book, Creating Wealth, and he had a revolutionary promise that you could use his 7 principles in that book and retire in 10 years or less. That gave me a framework to apply what I had learned in Rich Dad, Poor Dad, and I went on to apply that strategy, and I walked away from a 6-figure corporate job in just under 5 years. Now, the entire time I was going through that, I've had apprehension, right? I learned a lot of lessons the hard way, but nonetheless, I still achieved financial freedom in 10 years or less, but I still didn't truly 100% believe in what I was doing. I felt like I might be taking more risk, and maybe things were just working out. Several years later, I read Robert Kiyosaki's book, Why the Rich Are Getting Richer, and for the first time, it all made sense. I understood the game of money. And once I understood the game of money, I'll be honest with you, my friends, the game of money is now easy. Because I understand the game in which I'm playing, I understand the rules of the game, I understand who created the game, now I can play the game to win. And really what opened up inside of this book, and I've shared this in a previous podcast, so I'm going to skip over this very quickly to get to the point that I want to make for you today in this podcast. But inside of this book, it opened up the idea, the concept that there are four wealth forces at work at all times for all people inside of this economy: inflation, taxes, interest rates, and opportunity cost. These four wealth forces govern our economy. Now, it's important to understand those, because when you understand that these four wealth forces are inherently present inside of our economy, we can also look at that and say, how is my money positioned? Are those four wealth forces working for me, or are they working against me? And for most people, those four wealth forces are mathematically making it impossible for you to ever retire. This is why you're losing. This is why financial freedom feels so difficult. These are why, Robert Kiyosaki in his first book said savers are losers. And if you understand these wealth forces, you can position yourself to where they work for you, and you actually become wealthy almost despite yourself. It's really a game of positioning. But the thing I want you to understand inside of this podcast is I want you to look one level deeper. In fact, a couple of levels deeper, because it's really insidious when you understand who actually created the game, why they created the game, and ultimately that these wealth forces are a function of being of a manufactured economy. So in order to understand what these wealth forces are and how they're working, it's critically important to understand who actually created the game of money. Now, I want you to consider this for just a moment as a podcast listener. If you were going to create a game that you were going to play in, you would likely create a game that you could win, right? Why would you create a game that you would be the loser of? And so when we understand who created the game, and we understand that they created the game for them to win, we can now look at this and say, okay, I understand how they created the game, I understand why they created the game. Now the next question is, how can I position myself on their side versus the other side so I, like them, can win the game of money? So first and foremost, the government created the game of money. I mean, think about the economy. The economy is a manufactured, the economy in general, if you read Adam Smith and The Invisible Hand, the economy is a function of human beings getting together, but the economy is controlled today by the U.S. government, okay? Next in line are banks. The U.S. government institutes and initiates much of this manufactured economy through the banking system, and Wall Street is where the money's at. So those three entities are the ones who created the game and ultimately control the game. So by default, those are the three entities that are going to win the game that is being played today. So now we understand that, but one level deeper, it's so important that you understand this. And I'm going to give you a book that you can read, but I'm going to give you a disclaimer on it. It will thoroughly depress you, in addition to enlightening you. But underneath this, it's important to know that the game that was created was really created to, number one, keep you in the system, right? The longer you're in the system, the more you're a cog in the machine. And the more you're a cog in the machine, the more governments, banks, and Wall Street win. So what does it mean to keep you in the system? Well, number one, they want to keep you in the system paying taxes at the highest possible tax rate. They want you to get stuck in the system, so you'll be more than likely to vote for the next politician who will give you subsidies that the system can create. And then because you're stuck in the system hoping that one day you'll get out and you're not financially empowered, you'll funnel your money through banks, and you'll funnel your money through Wall Street to, the banks to accommodate your short-term desires through credit, and Wall Street to, hopefully take care of your long-term dreams through retirement planning. So they created the system to keep you in the system, but underneath all of this, it's critically important to understand who actually controls the game. The person who actually controls the game, and it's not a person, it's an entity or a group of people, is the Federal Reserve. The Federal Reserve controls the supply of money. They set the cost of money via interest rates, and they manipulate markets through quantitative easing or quantitative tightening. Now, you probably know and have heard of the Federal Reserve, but it's important to understand that the Federal Reserve isn't actually a place where money's at. It's not a reserve. It's not a bank. There's no monies there, and it's not a federal institution. The Federal Reserve is privately controlled. There is no democratic oversight. It has no reserves, and it wasn't really designed to serve you. It was necessarily designed to serve a private group of individuals, and B, the government, which then enacts their political agenda through banks and Wall Street. Now, the Federal Reserve, they socialize losses and they privatize gains. Go back to 2008. The very institutions that created the economic downfall that rocked the global economy, they were all bailed out. They socialized their losses, and when they say bailed out, right, they were let off the hook, and then money was printed. It was injected into the economy to make up for the deficits that the banks created, which inflated the money supply. Now, I'm going to talk a lot more about that here in just a minute, but they also privatize their gains. When they win at your expense, and when they lose, they win at our expense. So that's really what this entire thing is. But let me talk just briefly about how the Federal Reserve works. Now, the book that you can read, that again, the warning label is, it will depress you, but it will also show you exactly how this system works. Once I saw this, I couldn't ever look at the monetary system again. So the warning label on that is just understanding that you're going to get the truth, for as painful as the truth actually is. But here's how the Federal Reserve works. The U.S. government issues bonds, which are essentially IOUs. They do that to raise money to meet their agendas, right? The Federal Reserve buys those bonds. Now remember, the Federal Reserve is not a government agency. They buy those bonds, these IOUs, and they increase the monetary supply. They print more money. They manufacture money out of thin air. Now, the best way that I can explain inflation, for those of you, we all understand the impact of inflation because we're feeling it right now. But remember back in the day when I was growing up, I grew up in a very budget conscious family, and I'm grateful for that. But I remember back in the day, we would drink Kool-Aid, right? Did you ever drink Kool-Aid? My favorite flavor was grape, right? And, we had a couple of packets of Kool-Aid, and that's all we got for the month. And so if we drank the Kool-Aid too fast, there was no more Kool-Aid. We had to drink boring old water. But every time we had friends over, we would try to make the Kool-Aid last as long as possible. We would take the same packet of Kool-Aid, and rather than mixing it with the recommended amount of water, we would just add more water. Now, the Kool-Aid went further, but it watered down the taste. That's kind of like inflation. It's adding more water to the packet of Kool-Aid. It's adding more dollars to the same economic output, making every dollar have less impact to it, less purchasing power. So back to the Federal Reserve. The U.S. government issues bonds. The Federal Reserve buys those bonds. New money enters the market as debt owed, backed with interest, and banks multiply that money with debt and fractional reserve banking. Now, there's a lot more to that, but I'm just going to leave it right there. And what we've felt and seen with this entire system was in 1971, which is in the last episode, in episode 17, I talked to you about the changing of the tide. But in 1971, when we went off the gold standard, now we've given the federal government, through the Federal Reserve, the ability to print as much money as they want. And this is where the game gets crazy, because rather than raising taxes, my friends, honestly, Donald Trump is putting through an agenda right now to lower taxes. And if we look at taxes in the history of our economy, tax rates are as low as they've ever actually been today. Tax rates back in the early 20s and 30s and 40s, they used to go as high as 90%. Now, governments realized they could not tax that much because economic productivity stopped completely, so they cut and slashed tax rates down to, the top marginal tax bracket is around 40%, and that's a lot. No, don't get me wrong. But rather than raising taxes, the other side of the tax game is printing more money. They haven't raised taxes really in the better part of 50 years. And ultimately what they're doing is the way they're satisfying their spending objectives is not by collecting more tax revenue, but by printing more money. And here's the way this game works. Whether you're Republican or Democrat, there is more money entering the economy. Both of those parties are playing the exact same game, and I'm going to prove it to you right now. Because I think one of the most insidious things that's happening inside of our political culture right now is we're identifying ourselves as a Republican or a Democrat. But at the end of the day, my friends, ultimately those two parties are playing the exact same system. They're operating within a system that benefits them first, and they're just saying different things but doing the exact same things behind the political curtain. Let me prove it to you, okay? So over the last 20 plus years, here's how the monetary system has been manipulated by both Republicans Republicans and Democrats. So I'm going to go all the way back to the year 2000 because this is when it really started to rev up. So President Bush was the president from 2001 through 2009. President Bush was a Republican. Now, there's lots of reasons behind why he did what he did, but during his tenure as president, he increased the money supply. He put in 70%, 69% more money into the economy by adding 3.4 trillion new dollars. That's the Kool-Aid all over again. 3.4 trillion new dollars to an economy that wasn't any more productive. Obama came in and actually, as a Democrat, said he needed to balance the budget. He needed to be a responsible steward, but Obama played the exact same game. From 2009 to 2016, he came in and he raised the money supply by 60%. He added 5 trillion more dollars, and up until recently was the most money printed ever in the history of our country during Obama's tenure. Donald Trump came in, and a Republican again, so we have Republican, Democrat, now Republican, again said the same thing. We need to be fiscally responsible. We need to be better about balancing our budget. Now, Trump actually printed more money in dollars than has ever been printed. He beat out Obama by $1.2 trillion. He printed $6.2 trillion. Now, because our monetary supply was so high at that point, it only represented a 47% increase, but only is a very precarious word because he added $6.2 trillion. And my friends, that is why the economy sucks so bad right now. It was that injection of wealth because Biden came in, and for all the things that he did wrong during 2021 to 2025, he only added 7% more money supplied to the economy, $1.2 trillion. Now, there was a lot of quantitative tightening with interest rates going up. Money was sucked out of the economy. But my friends, here's the game. Over the last 25 years, the thing I want you to understand is that when the money supply increases faster than real output, the value of money falls. This is what causes inflation. And over the last 25 years, there's been an average of 13% new money created and injected into the economy every single year over the last 25 years. So inflation isn't what they tell you inflation is. Inflation is somewhere between what they tell you it is and between 13%. Now, if inflation is 13% or 5% or 7% or 10%, somewhere between what they tell you and what the money supply increase has been, can you save your way to financial freedom? And the answer is unequivocally absolutely not. And so the only way to win in the game of money is to understand what I'm about to share with you next. Now, as I was preparing this presentation and then delivering this presentation, Trump and Musk got in the political breakup of maybe the year or ever. They started flinging mud at them. And Musk came in and said, look, you promised that you were going to make cuts. You promised you were going to balance the budget. You promised you were going to bring the economy back in line with, economic incoming activity from taxes. And you're not doing it because Trump is proposing $2.2 trillion in new debt being created. He's playing the exact same game. And man, watching those two melt down was kind of crazy. But here's the reality of it all, my friends. Right now, there is $37 trillion just in national debt. And over the next 18 months, at the time of this recording, the debt that was taken out over the last 15 years was taken out at nearly 0% interest rates. And a lot of that debt, in fact, 40% of that debt is maturing over the next 18 months. And for every 1% increase in interest rate, it adds $360 billion just in interest alone on that debt. So if all of that debt were to refinance at a 5.5% interest rate on $36 trillion, we would be spending $2 trillion alone on interest only. It would make the largest budget the largest budget line item on the U.S. budget is just the interest on the national debt. So last thing I'm going to share with you, and then I'm going to get into the main point of this presentation was really this. And I can't pronounce this dude's first name, but Mayor Amschel Rothschild. So, Rothschild, the one who really was behind a lot of this economic system being put into place, he had a quote way back in the day, back in the 1800s. And he said, "Permit me to issue and control the money of a nation, and I care not who makes its laws." This is really the game. The Federal Reserve, the money printing machine, a private entity, a private institution that the government uses to inject more money into the economy without raising taxes but still be able to complete their objectives, is the way the game is played. And if you understand that, then the game, that who created the game and who's benefiting from the game, then the real question is, how do I position myself on the same side? Because this isn't a moral stance. Morally, I believe what the federal government is doing, what the Federal Reserve is doing, is wrong. And I could sit here and say it's morally wrong and lose in the game of money and become dependent, or I could say it's morally wrong, but that is the way the economy is set up. And rather than being a servant of the economy, rather than being a slave to the economy, how about I become empowered within this economy to win in the game of money? So here are the 7 steps that you have to understand to really win in the game of money. Number 1, in order to win in the game of money inside of these new rules is, number 1, gaining access to debt. My friends, today, debt is money. And that's so hard for so many people to wrap their brains around. And for myself included, it took me years to really get comfortable with that concept. Number 2, use debt to acquire an asset. Number 3, amortize the debt by renting the assets. Number 4, letting time and inflation do the heavy lifting. Number 5, converting the equity into cash without selling the asset. And number 6, protecting the cash in your privatized bank. And then number 7, repeat that process. Now, those are 7 powerful steps with lots of detail behind each one of them. But if you want to win in the game of money today, it's understanding these 7 steps, and it's combining your resources, your economic, your attention, and ultimately your ability to implement this system that will allow you to win within the system and buy your time back. So let me repeat them. Number 1, gaining access to debt. Number 2, acquiring an asset. In the next podcast, I'm going to tell you all about what an asset actually is. Number 3, amortizing the debt by renting out the asset. Number 4, letting time and inflation do the heavy lifting. Number 5, converting the equity into cash without selling the asset. And number 6, protecting the cash in your privatized bank, and then repeating the process. This really essentially, my friends, is what we do here at in Money Mastery, in the community that we operate inside of our world. We talk all about this game of the passive income machine. And the passive income machine is really a way to use these rules to really win in the game of money. Because at the end of the day, the thing that matters more than anything is your most precious and scarce resource, your time. It's understanding the game of money and using these rules to buy back your time, to control your time, and to truly become ungovernable, to become a sovereign individual, to be able to say, look, I can see what's going on in the world. I'm going to use my money to buy my time back, and then I'm going to chase down my purpose and make the world a better place. That's really the game of money that I see, and hopefully that's the game of money that you see for yourself. Now, if you have any questions on what to do, on how to do this, we have a big summit coming up. I know I talk a lot about that in these podcasts, but that's really where I would go. We're releasing a book that's going to give you all of the detail around these 7 steps that I just gave you. But if you want to truly take control of your money, it's understanding that there are people right now that are winning at your expense. They're winning at your expense. And you can let that go on, or you could align yourself with the economic forces. Understand that there is a game at play, and rather than losing the game, start winning. You're playing the game one way or the other. Why not play it to win?